Saturday, 5:42 p.m. My name is Miriam Hale. I'm 62. I spent 30 years in critical care, learning how to count a breath, steady a shaking hand, and find the pulse under chaos. The penthouse I bought on West End Avenue, $22 million of glass, steel, and earned quiet, was where I came to remember how to live after my husband died. The elevator chimed once. Ding. The doors slid open onto my floor. Oiled wood met the sweet tang of evening. Sun bled copper along the Hudson and climbed the windows like a slow fire. I set my weekend bag down and stepped into my home. Nora was on a folding ladder. My daughter's hair was pinned, her back straight, her jaw locked with the authority of a person who had already decided how this would end. In her hands, the silver frame that held my wedding photo, my husband's grin, young and impossible, was halfway off its hook. On the console, another frame waited. The hearts, her in-laws, arranged in stiff perfection. Trade one face for another, swap one history for the next. Behind her, Caleb poured red wine into wide-bellied glasses for Harold and Patricia Hart. Ice clinked in the bar trough. Fabric whispered as someone crossed their legs on my sofa. Laughter, the comfortable kind, occupied the space where my husband's voice used to be. No one startled when I appeared. Nora turned her head a fraction, met my eyes, and went back to her work. The tiny screwdriver flashed. The last screw surrendered with a neat metallic sigh. She lifted the photo of my marriage away from the wall, handed it down, and placed the heart portrait in its place. It clicked into the old hole like it had been measured for this moment. Harold raised his glass toward me. Polite, practiced. Patricia smiled the smile I used to see at fundraising dinners when someone wanted the table by the window. Caleb touched Nora's elbow. He didn't look at me. "Stop," I said, not loudly. The room obeyed the word for a heartbeat. Then my daughter stepped off the ladder and stood between me and the view. "This isn't yours anymore," Nora said, each word trimmed and ironed. "It belongs to them now." "You're not welcome here." I felt my fingers close around the bag handle until the tendons rose like blue wire under skin. Old muscle memory. In triage, you don't grab or beg. You assess. You note. You decide. I smiled. Slowly. The kind of smile people mistake for surrender. "Since when does a thing I paid for," I asked, "become someone else's without me knowing?" Patricia set her glass on the marble. No coaster. The ring darkened against the stone like a bruise forming. "You barely stay here," she said, voice honeyed and harmless. "It's wasteful to leave such a place empty." "We need stability." "Generosity looks good on you," Harold added, still polite. "We're grateful." Nora tilted her chin. "I've arranged everything. We'll move their things up this weekend." I took in the room with a nurse's inventory. The wool throw my husband chose on a snowy afternoon. The scratch on the bar where he learned to slide a shaker without spilling. The bowl where I keep keys, the shallow chip at its rim from the night we danced in our socks and knocked it over. The air smelled like orange oil and a little like home. "I drove 2 hours to be in my own house," I said. "I'd like to come in tonight." Nora didn't blink. "No, we have plans. You'll be in the way." The sun reddened the river and pulled its light down inch by inch. I could hear a sail rope tapping something metal far below. The sound had always calmed me. "All right," I said. The word tasted like a coin. "Enjoy your evening." I pressed the elevator button. My thumb was steady. The car opened with a hush. Voices swelled behind me again. A cork popped. Someone laughed at something Caleb said. When the doors drew together, I saw my daughter reach for another frame on another wall. On screen, if you were reading the captions the internet loves for spectacle, you'd see the line "They forced me to live." My daughter claimed my $22 million penthouse and gifted it to her in-laws. She declared, "It belongs to them now, you're not welcome here." I stayed calm and smiled. Yet the day they tried to settle inside, the surprise I prepared left them speechless. It is a true sentence, all of it. The elevator hummed its soft descent. At the lobby, the doorman glanced up, then wisely glanced away. I stepped into the cool of the vestibule and let the revolving door press me back into the city's breath. On the sidewalk, the wind smelled like rain that might not come. I stood long enough to count to 10 the way I taught families in the waiting room to count when the monitors went wild. 10 gives your blood a chance to catch up with your bones. I thought of the latter, of Nora's fingers prying our years off the wall, of the picture frame sliding into a space it didn't earn. There are many ways to move someone out of a room. You can raise your voice. You can clutch and plead. Or, if you've been an ICU nurse long enough to know that quiet is also a tool, you can make a plan the way you set a line, the way you chart vitals, the way you decide when to give a patient back their breath. I zipped my coat, pulled the bag strap higher on my shoulder. My palm had left a crescent on the leather where I'd held on too long. I looked up at my floor. The light in the corner window blinked and held. I could almost see the heart portrait where my husband used to grin into the future. "Noted," I said to the air. "All of it." I started walking. Home first, then coffee, then a clean sheet of paper and a blunt pencil. I would write down times, names, rules that look soft until you walk into them. I would list the systems this building lives by, the ones people ignore because they don't think they apply to them. I would call the manager who knew where the bones of this place were buried. I would put my hand back on the pulse and measure what had gone wild. When my husband was dying, I learned the difference between fighting and deciding. You fight the wrong things, and you exhaust everybody. You decide the right things, and the room changes shape. I didn't need to shout. I needed to decide. And the decision started now. If you've ever been told you weren't welcome in your own home, stay with me. Tell me where you're listening from, and before the next chapter, leave a quiet "I'm here" in the comments. It helps more than you know. Night finds Queens sooner than Manhattan, or maybe grief pulls dusk forward. I carried my weekend bag up the narrow stairs, past a basil plant and the clatter of chopsticks behind a door that never latches. Inside, my apartment exhaled. I set my keys in the chipped bowl, 2 soft clinks like coins marking a depth. I put water on for coffee, black, unsweetened, 1 measured bitterness at a time. The kettle began its thin whistle. I leveled each spoonful the way I once measured morphine. Steady wrist, no bravado. Ritual steadies the hands. It steadies the voice as well, always. While the kettle worked, I crossed to the bookshelf. My husband's picture stayed where I left it, his laugh mid-bloom. I touched the glass, cool as hospital tile at midnight. On the chair back, his wool scarf waited. I lifted it, breathed faint soap and winter. Grief is a scent you learn. Steam rose. I poured. Coffee gave the room smoke and earth. I carried the mug to the table by the window and sat where I can watch the elevated tracks decide their night. Queens is not quiet like money. It is quiet like a workroom after hours. It lets the mind lay its tools out. I pulled a battered notebook and a short pencil shaved to honesty. Graph paper weighted. Blue squares, modest and exact. I wrote the time the way nurses chart in triage, 2016, Saturday. Then, in block letters I could read without emotion later, I wrote, "The day they try to settle here, they will not forget." Plans are not born of rage. In my world, they are born of precision. Precision is mercy. A sloppy dose hurts the patient you swear you love. A sloppy boundary hurts the life you claim to protect. So I began where we begin at the bedside. Pulse, assess. I listed names: Nora, Caleb, Harold Hart, Patricia Hart. I listed systems: doorman, front desk, fob access, elevator scheduling, fire suppression, ventilation, plumbing, board bylaws. I listed documents: deed, LLC agreement, notice emails, compliance calendars. I listed allies: Manager Alvarez, Chair Rossi, Zoe from the M&M Nurses Fund. The page filled like a chest X-ray, ribs of structure, lungs dark with breath, splint, stabilize. A splint looks cruel until the pain drops. I wrote. Update access lists. Flag unauthorized long-term stay. Notify front desk of non-resident attempts. Pre-schedule compliance tests within posted windows. Ask maintenance to confirm. Intervals. These are not traps. These are braces. Suture. Close cleanly. 6 months ago, I moved 51% of my LLC to the Nurses Residency Fund in my husband's name, with automatic transfer of the rest upon evidence of coercion. I had prayed never to need that clause. Prayer is oxygen, not a stitch. Tonight I acknowledged the wound and prepared the thread. I drank. Heat returned to my fingers. Outside, a bus sighed. The refrigerator hummed. The radiator ticked. I opened a fresh page and wrote the morning. 0815. Call Alvarez. Confirm bylaw 6.2, 7.1. Request precise desk memo. 8:40. Email Rossi for Wednesday 9 board time. 9:10. Compile Nora's messages. Print affidavit of receipt. 9:30. Text Zoe. Keep the girls flexible for a possible move-in date. Request cots and linens. 10 o'clock. Walk the block. Sharpen the pencil. The cup emptied. I added a finger of hot water to wake the last bitterness. Rage wanted the wheel. Grief wanted the map. I buckled both into the back seat. The part of me that knows how to steer stayed up front. I looped the scarf once. Lamb's wool has a particular tooth. It catches enough to remind you you're here. In the mirror, I saw a woman older than the bride in the picture and steadier. People confuse steadiness with surrender. Back at the table, I drew a simple map of the penthouse. Door, hall, kitchen, terrace, control panel, breaker closet. I penciled where air travels, where bags land, where a person confident in entitlement will set a glass without a coaster. Not to haunt anyone. To let the building spine speak. Rules are bones. They keep the soft parts safe. At 2103, I made 3 columns. What hurts, what helps, what heals. Under hurts, being told I'm a guest in my own life. Under helps, timestamps, procedures, names. Under heals, purpose. Giving the home a second calling that honors the first. I closed the notebook and rested my palm on the cover until my pulse slowed under bone. The city moved on without me. Rooms shouldn't hold their breath for our decisions. I rinsed the mug, killed the light over the sink, and stood in the doorway to let night draw a line across the floor. Somewhere a siren rose, did its job, and faded. Tomorrow would come hard and necessary. I would meet it with quiet, the sharpest instrument I own. On Sunday morning, at precisely 8:17, I stepped into the management office on the lobby level. It smelled of printer ink, air conditioning, and someone's half-finished blueberry muffin. The overhead fluorescence buzzed like a nervous insect. Mrs. Alvarez looked up from her screen, glasses halfway down her nose, perfectly square in posture, hair pinned and lacquered like a flag that never surrenders. She was the kind of woman you'd trust to hold a newborn or detain a fugitive, depending on the need. "Miriam," she said, not smiling. "Respect, not warmth. We both preferred it that way. I saw your email." I flagged the memo for priority thank. "You," I said. "I'd like to confirm some procedures before next week's inspection window." She clicked into the building operations portal and turned her screen toward me, tilting it at an angle that meant, "You're not just watching, you're responsible." "The residential bylaws remain unchanged since the May update," she began. Section 6.2 explicitly prohibits any long-term occupancy by non-listed tenants without prior board approval. Long-term means any stay exceeding 6 calendar days, recurring within a 3-week period. I nodded. Section 7.1 covers access rights. Any fob not registered to a current resident or approved guest can be temporarily deactivated if misused. Grounds include subletting, security breaches, or, she glanced up, aggressive assertion of ownership where no deed exists. She tapped the screen. The Hart family has not submitted a stay request. Not for this month. Not ever good, I said. Let's update the no-stay list. She opened a new form. Names? Nora Hale, Caleb Hart, Harold Hart, Patricia Hart. I paused. Permanent until further notice. She typed, crisp keystrokes slicing the air. Noted and time-stamped. A faint silence followed, the kind before thunder. Then she asked, "Would you like the system to escalate automatically if fob use is attempted past 3 denials?" "Yes," I said. 3 strikes, deactivate access. Another tab. "Calendar items next," she murmured. "We've got system inspections this month. The timing works." She clicked open a separate panel. Colored blocks like a hospital scheduling board. "Fire suppression tests," she read aloud. "Wednesday, 10 a.m. Building-wide ventilation flush. Thursday, 2:30 p.m. Pipe descaling and vertical flush. Friday, 9 a.m. You want in on all 3? "Please," I said. "Penthouse access authorized." "I'll be there." She checked a box and slid the form to me. "Initial here." It confirms consent for maintenance entry during system-wide checks I signed. The pen's weight steadied my hand. I had held heavier instruments, forceps mid-surgery, gauze soaked in failing breath. Paperwork didn't scare me. When I passed the form back, her face shifted, not softened, tightened. "Miriam," she said, lowering her voice, "do you want me to trigger a red flag?" I looked up. "That logs an alert across all access systems," she continued. "Front desk, package delivery, service elevators. It won't prevent anything physical, but it documents the pattern. It's a legal breadcrumb." I didn't answer immediately. She added, "It's invisible to the board unless they go looking. But it's time-stamped. Every swipe, every attempt. If someone tries to install themselves where they don't belong, the building keeps a pulse." That word, pulse, cut clean. "Yes," I said. "Trigger it." She clicked a final key. A small red icon blinked in the upper corner of the building's profile. "That's it," she said. "The building has teeth now." We sat in the quiet that followed, not awkward, not intimate, but exact. She knew what this was. She had seen it in other forms. Children removing parents like old wallpaper, entitlement cloaked as inheritance. She had also seen women like me before, soft-voiced, precise, unshakable once the final line had been crossed. I stood. "Thank you, Mrs. Alvarez. You're welcome, Ms." Hale outside. The elevator pinged its arrival like a bell calling me back to the surface. I stepped in, pressed PH, and let the doors close. As the car climbed, I placed my hand on the rail. The stainless steel felt clinical, grounded. My reflection in the glass walls followed me upward, dim, steady, unadorned. The building knew its bones now, and I had just made sure it could bite. 6 months earlier, the air held a different kind of stillness, one that follows endings but precedes decision. It was late March. The penthouse was cold not from winter but from absence. I hadn't turned on the heat. I wanted the silence to sting, to make the next step feel earned. On the dining table, where we used to set out holiday dishes and folded cloth napkins, sat the final draft of the transfer agreement. 51% of my holding company, MH Equity One, LLC, the legal owner of the penthouse, was set to change hands, not to family, not to charity in name only, but to the M&M Nurses Residence Fund, a trust I had formed and funded quietly in my husband's name, M&M Miriam and Marcus, not a foundation that gave speeches, a mechanism, a valve, a way to keep what we built beating in the right hands. The clause was simple in structure and ruthless in logic. The remaining 49% would transfer automatically if I ever faced coercion, displacement, or forced forfeiture by a direct heir or affiliated party. The trigger: a notarized incident log, board verification, and my signature. Legal, clean, no courtrooms, no noise, just a click. I held the pen. Some women burn bridges. I reinforced them with fail-safes. I signed. That afternoon, I met Zoe for tea. She had been a scholarship recipient, rural Kansas, class of 2020. We crossed paths when she rotated through my old unit for training. Bright-eyed and quick on her feet, with the kind of heart that made patients cling to her hand like it meant gravity. When I stepped back from floor work after Marcus passed, I had asked Zoe to help structure the M&M Fund into something that lived. We met at a tiny bistro near Roosevelt Island where traffic hums softened into fairy wind. "You sure?" she had asked, hands tight around her mug. "Yes," I said. "You know why." She had nodded, then smiled, half resigned, half proud. "It's going to help a lot of us, especially the ones who can't afford to keep working in this city." "That's the point," I said. Rotational housing, nurses from underserved, counties, 3-month stays, renewable, subsidized, somewhere clean, safe. With dignity, Zoe pulled out her tablet. "We already have 3 applicants lined up for summer rotation, all licensed, all cleared. One's a single mom from Tallahassee. The other 2 just finished trauma internships in Milwaukee." I looked down into my tea. The lemon slice floated like a quiet moon. "Let's make it happen," I said. She glanced around. "What about your daughter?" I paused. I hadn't spoken of Nora much, not since she married Caleb. There were words for grief, even for betrayal, but not for watching someone rewire themselves away from kindness, not for the sound of their voice the first time they called you extra. "She has her own place," I said. Zoe didn't press. She was a nurse. "We know when to change the dressing and when to leave it covered." When we parted, she pressed something into my hand. "He left this at the staff lounge years ago," she said. "It was Marcus's scarf, soft navy lamb's wool with the faintest charcoal threading, a gift I had given him our second winter. It still smelled faintly of pine and starch, like coat pockets and December." I brought it home and laid it across the back of the sofa. That night I slept beneath it, not for warmth but for tethering. Weeks passed, the fund was ratified, the deed modification logged, the maintenance schedule aligned, no one noticed. And now, 6 months later, I stood at my small desk in Queens, opened the drawer and placed the scarf inside the box with the red tab. Next to it, my notarized incident record, Mrs. Alvarez's access denial log, and Nora's declaration captured from the hallway security feed. Time-stamped, verified, the trigger was ready, but I didn't pull it yet, because this story wasn't about vengeance. It was about restoration, the kind that requires preparation, like stitching a deep wound closed, layer by layer, not to erase the scar, but to make sure it won't split open again. Marcus always said, "We don't fix people. We close what bleeds so they can heal." And so, I chose to believe this building, this home, our home, still had a purpose beyond ego and inheritance. I wasn't giving it away. I was repurposing it, quietly, intentionally, like a scarf kept in a drawer, like a name no one thought to honor anymore. Miriam Hale would not vanish. She would redirect. On a Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang 3 times in under 2 minutes. Once from Nora's number, once from an unknown line, and once from a contact I hadn't seen in over a year, Laura Shepard, Esquire. I let them all go to voicemail. 15 minutes later, I opened my inbox to a formal email titled, "Notice of Legal Inquiry Regarding Primary Residence and Inheritance Rights, Nora Hale versus Miriam Hale." The file was precisely worded, bloodless in tone, and full of legalistic presumptions about intended succession, emotional ownership, and, most notably, familial equity. At 3:41 p.m., Nora called again. I answered. Her voice was tight, theatrical. "Mom, I just want to talk." Caleb's uncle connected us to Laura. She's handled family estate transitions before. There's no need for this tension to escalate, if we can just sit down and be reasonable. I said nothing. She pushed forward. "You built this life for your family. And I am your only daughter. That means something. You can't just bypass me for some rotating nurse housing plan. That's not legacy. That's betrayal." There it was, betrayal. I stayed quiet. Silence is not passive. It's a scalpel when wielded well. She continued, her voice tightening further. Look, either you transfer the keys officially, co-own with us, maybe a leasing agreement if you need to save face, or I'll pursue formal litigation under New York's constructive trust doctrine. You raised me to fight for what I deserve. I picked up my recorder, one I kept beside my stovetop for recipes and old lullabies, and pressed record. I spoke clearly. Nora, this is your mother. I am recording this call for my own records. You have just made a verbal ultimatum involving legal coercion and the threat of litigation regarding my property. You have framed it as a matter of emotional fairness, but your demands are explicitly financial. Click. I ended the call. 10 minutes later, her text came through. Nora, either we finalize the transfer this week or I'm cutting you out for good. No wedding, no grandkids, nothing. You'll be alone with your nurses and your guilt. I stared at the message. It came from her number, time-stamped, emotionally manipulative, legally reckless. I took a screenshot and forwarded it to my legal advisor, Maya Chung, who had helped me structure the M&M fund. She replied in 4 minutes flat. Maya, keep everything. Do not respond. This constitutes coercion and emotional blackmail. We're documenting it under pre-trigger Clause B. You are covered. Covered. Funny how that word meant both safe and buried. I brewed black coffee in the corner of my kitchenette, the smell grounding me in memory. The night shifts, the first years with Marcus, Nora asleep on the couch with her baby blanket gripped like a peace treaty. I sat at my small table in Queens, opened the red tab box, and placed the printout of her message next to the voice recording log. The red scarf peeked out from beneath the folder. I didn't touch it, just let it breathe in the same air. By Friday, Laura Shepard had sent a second notice. This time thinner, laced with veiled language about resolution pathways and avoiding media entanglements. Nora had CC'd herself in the thread, replying, I'm still hopeful my mother will come to her senses. Her senses? My senses had never been sharper. There's a thing that happens in hospitals, especially in ICU. You'll get a family member who claims to know better than the doctor. One who demands charts, second guesses pain meds, and insists that Mom would have wanted us to unplug her now. And often, they're not the ones who've been at her bedside every day. They're the ones who need closure without cost. That's what Nora wanted now, a clean, pain-free inheritance, a shortcut through grief, sealed with keys. But I had been a nurse too long to hand over the medicine cabinet to someone who only ever showed up when the estate was nearly signed. That Friday night, I recorded another message, this time to myself. This is Miriam Hale. I have received 2 legal threats, one verbal and one in writing, from my daughter, Nora Hale. I do not feel unsafe, but I do acknowledge her behavior as coercive. This entry documents my intent to uphold the structural integrity of the M&M Fund in accordance with clauses ratified 6 months ago. I saved it to the external drive. Then I stared out the window toward the river. It was one of those early summer dusks, soft blue melting into orange, like the city was trying to apologize for how loud it had been all week. But I wasn't seeking apology. I was preparing for clarity. Nora's tantrum wasn't surprising. What came next would be. Saturday, 1:58 p.m. I didn't go upstairs. Instead, I chose the worn leather bench by the east-facing window in the lobby. From that angle, the lobby chandelier floated like a quiet moon above my head. The marble floor reflected its light in fractured silver ripples. I slowed my breathing until it matched the rhythm of the elevator chimes. 1 floor up, then another, then back down. It had nothing to do with me. Not yet. My phone sat face up on my lap. The building's internal dashboard was open. I watched it update in real time. Access logs, keycard failures, elevator override requests. At 1:58 p.m., 3 red alerts appeared on the screen. Unauthorized fob attempt, lobby A turnstile. ID number 432, NORA unauthorized fob attempt, Lobby A turnstile, ID number 433, CALEB, unauthorized fob attempt, Lobby A turnstile, ID number 434, HARTP. The screen blinked twice. Then it stopped trying. I looked up. Nora was at the desk, her mouth moving fast. She wore cream linen and sunglasses too large for the cloudy day. Behind her, Harold and Patricia Hart stood with crossed arms. Caleb pulled a suitcase across the marble, its wheels tapping a rhythm that echoed like impatience. The concierge, Deshawn, kept his hands folded on the counter. Calm, polite, perfect posture. From where I sat, I couldn't hear Nora's voice, but I didn't need to. I knew the tone. That clipped, upward lilt at the end of every demand. That voice she used when she'd already decided the outcome and couldn't be bothered with process. I tapped the dashboard. Camera view. Lobby A. Wide. The screen showed me what I was already seeing with my own eyes. My daughter pointing at the turnstile, Caleb shrugging, Harold pacing, Patricia looking insulted by the wallpaper. Nora reached into her tote, pulled out a manila folder. I didn't need to ask what was inside. Some version of her interpretation, a printout of old emails, a copy of my birthday card from 2016 where I wrote, "One day, this place will be yours." No notarization, no deed, just nostalgia weaponized. Deshawn nodded, took the folder, and calmly passed it to the building manager, who had stepped forward from the back office. Sandra Alvarez. Now Sandra, unlike most people Nora is used to dealing with, does not perform. She doesn't rush. She doesn't fill silence with noise. She reviewed the folder slowly, one page at a time. I watched Nora bounce slightly on her heels. The screen in my lap updated again. Note added. Resident override active per co-op bylaw. Section 8.3a. Occupancy restricted to pre-approved residents. Visitors limited to 72 hours. Then 2 quick entries. Keycard access revoked. IDs number 432, number 433, number 434. Flag added. Escorted entry required. I looked up just as Caleb tried his card again. It beeped red. Nora turned sharply. Caleb gestured. She turned back toward the desk, mouth a tight slash. I leaned back on the bench and stared at the ceiling. The black glass above reflected everything in reverse. It looked like we were under a frozen lake, everyone moving too slowly, sound muffled by something colder than water. Disbelief. The moment no longer belonged to Nora. It belonged to the rules she hadn't read. Beneath the bench, I flexed my feet slowly like I used to do in OR before a critical stitch. People think precision is about speed. It isn't. It's about stillness. 2 more elevator dings. A pair of nurses passed through the lobby. One held a tote with the M&M Fund logo. They didn't notice Nora. They had nothing to do with her war. Sandra spoke now, gently but firmly. I couldn't hear her words, but I knew her script. It was printed, vetted, co-op certified. Nora lifted her phone. Her thumb moved fast, probably texting me. I didn't feel it vibrate. I'd turned off all alerts before I left the apartment. I didn't need noise. I had everything I needed here, inside the silence I had stitched for this exact hour. Across the room, Caleb let the suitcase handle go. It fell with a dull thud on the marble. I looked at it for a moment, not in anger, just a notation, like when a heart monitor hiccups once but stays steady. They hadn't spoken to me. Not once. I hadn't looked directly at them. Not once. But the message was clear, from both sides. This place had rules, not sentimental wishes, not secondhand expectations. Rules, and today those rules had teeth. 2:07 p.m. The dashboard chimed once. Then it turned green. Guest access granted. Penthouse entry. Temporary ID. ENG check. Guest 1. I didn't need to guess who was holding the guest fob, the one they must have fished out after the regular ones failed. That card was meant for short-term repairmen, pre-cleared for 20-minute windows. Caleb must have remembered it. From the boiler leak last spring, a gamble. But it worked. I watched it unfold on screen. The penthouse door registered as opened. A thin delay. Then, system override triggered, compliance protocol ENG 928. And then the lobby speakers cracked faintly. Not the main system, just the internal diagnostic loop that activates during a full compliance test. Few residents ever heard it. A female voice, even and unbothered, filled the audio feed. System compliance testing now initiated. All non-residents, please vacate kitchen and bathroom areas. Water purge will begin in 90 seconds. Lighting audit in progress. Ventilation override active. I didn't look up. I didn't need to. My eyes stayed on the ceiling reflection, but in my lap, on the screen, everything began to light up. The penthouse unit map flashed. Rooms pulsing soft yellow. Lighting diagnostic. On ventilation surge. Engaged drain. Flush test. Pre-surge in 0057, 0056, 0055. The vents opened, not with a roar, not with steam, but with something more surreal. A whisper of wind, the kind of movement you feel before a snowstorm or after someone's last breath. Above their heads, test bulbs began to blink in calculated patterns. Warm, cool, daylight, off. The thermostat surged to maximum, then dropped to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, then normalized. A dance only the system knew how to lead. I imagined Nora standing there, suitcase still unopened, while the apartment she thought she owned began to pulse like something living. Every modern luxury has a regulator. Every luxury regulator has a watchdog, and every watchdog listens to its master. In this case, the Co-op Board's automated compliance watchdog, backed by a 700-page document that Sandra Alvarez had once described as delightfully unfriendly. At 2:09 p.m., the water mist began. Not a flood, not enough to damage, but enough to veil the kitchen island in a sheen of sterilization-grade vapor. Cool, scentless, clinical, like the disinfection system in old trauma bays. I once told Zoe that this building was built like a hospital that forgot it was one. It remembered today. On screen, I watched a silhouette, probably Caleb, duck into the hallway. Patricia pointed toward the fridge, probably asking if the food would be safe. Nora paced the living room, holding her phone. A new line appeared. Call initiated. Penthouse line. Front desk. 0008. 0009. 00010. I looked up. Deshawn took the call, calm as ever. He listened, then responded, exactly as trained. Yes, ma'am. This is a scheduled compliance run, filed under maintenance cycle B9. Notices were posted. Timed access is standard protocol when guest cards are used. No override possible during active cycle. He hung up. No hesitation, no escalation. I almost smiled. The screen pulsed again. I could now hear the voice from the penthouse speaker through the system relay. Drain flush in progress. Please refrain from using faucets. The toilet in the powder room would do a full pressure dump any second now. I imagined Patricia's face. People like her were used to pretending to own silence. Today, the silence answered back with pressure, airflow, blinking sensors, and an automated system that neither yelled nor apologized, just followed the law. That was the beauty of it. It wasn't me who said no. It was the building, the bylaws, the air vents, the lighting grid, the bones of this place. My name was nowhere on the declaration. It didn't need to be. On the dashboard, one final note appeared. Testing cycle ends in 0 hours, 2 minutes, and 39 seconds. 0 hours, 2 minutes, and 38 seconds. I locked the screen and slid the phone into my coat pocket. Across the lobby, no one moved to approach me. Not a glance, not a question. They were still trapped in the illusion that if they played their next card just right, the game would shift. But it wouldn't. This wasn't poker. It was surgery, and everything was already sterile. 2:32 p.m. I took the service elevator up. Not for drama, for design. It stopped one floor below the penthouse. I took the staff stairwell the last flight. Quiet steps, polished steel rail, a smell of lemon polish and old heating coils. When I stepped in, the apartment was lit like a showroom. Everything too clean, too arranged, like someone trying to impress a bank. I didn't look around. I walked directly to the small antique coat hook carved into the back of the study door. He'd installed it himself, said the hallway needed one place that wasn't curated. I slid my wool coat onto it. The movement was quiet, reverent. Then I turned. They were all in the living room, Nora standing, Caleb by the window. Harold and Patricia Hart were seated, their posture too proud to look comfortable. Nora broke first. "You came up," she said, flat. I nodded. "Yes." She glanced toward Patricia, like waiting for her cue. I walked farther in and stopped in the same spot where our Christmas tree once stood. My heels sank softly into the carpet I'd had custom dyed to match the Hudson. "You don't need to stay long," Patricia said, smoothing her slacks. "We've got everything handled." I said nothing. Nora folded her arms. "Look, we're not trying to fight. But this place, it's ours now. I just wanted to be the one to say it to you directly. With respect, I echoed. Not a question, just a taste of the words. Caleb spoke up, voice too casual. "We're family, Miriam. That's what this place needs. A family again. You've all said a lot," I said. My voice was low, measured. "But you've been speaking for me for quite a while." I turned to Nora. "You've claimed to speak for my wishes. You've told people I was moving on, retreating, leaving behind." She blinked. I didn't. That ends today. There it was. Just the sentence, like a switchblade opening in velvet. "I'm not trying to replace you," she said quickly, eyes darting. "But you've been so distant. You spend all your time in Queens, in that old place. That old place is where I go when I need peace. Something this apartment hasn't had in a long time." Patricia stood now. "Miriam, let's not be theatrical. We are family. Whether you like it or not, you can't evict family." I looked at her. Straight. Soft final. "Family," I said, "does not replace a legal resident without process." She paused. "We're not replacing you." I tilted my head slightly. "You're standing in my kitchen." With my daughter, holding a guest fob. During an active compliance override, Nora stepped forward. "You're being cruel." I turned fully toward her now. No venom, no shake. "I gave you decades," I said, "and silence. And space. But not this." Caleb cut in. "You can't just—" I raised a hand. He stopped. The air in the room changed, not louder, not colder, just clearer. "I'm not here to argue," I said. "I'm here to make a boundary visible. The kind you all pretended wasn't there." Then I walked past them, to the small box by the pantry. I opened it and took out my husband's hand-etched wine key, the kind he used for birthdays and no reason at all. I held it in my palm like a token, then placed it on the counter. "This home is not an heirloom," I said quietly. "It's not a trophy or a narrative or a symbol." I turned again. "It's a place. My place, and I will not be displaced." Nora looked ready to cry. Caleb looked ready to shout. Harold looked confused. Patricia, just angry. "You'll regret this," she said coldly. I smiled, just a little. "I don't think I will." It was raining. Light. The kind of drizzle that doesn't fall so much as it lingers mid-air, slipping down from the awnings like second thoughts. I didn't expect them to show up again, but I should have. Nora knocked once, sharp. Caleb stood behind her, eyes low. I could see Harold's outline in the car through the slatted blinds. Patricia stayed seated, of course. I opened the door, apron still on. A saucepan of bone broth simmered behind me. You didn't answer my texts, Nora said. No, I didn't, I replied. She glanced down the hallway like unsure if she wanted to enter. You're not going to come back home? She asked. I am home, I said. That landed wrong. She flinched. We're trying to fix this. But you're making things harder than they have to be. I stepped aside, not to invite them in, but to reach for the small teak sideboard by the entry. I lifted a crisp manila envelope, hand-addressed, heavy. I extended it to her. She hesitated. Caleb reached for it instead. He opened it. Inside, a one-page printed notice. Wednesday, 9 a.m. sharp. Resident Oversight Board. Conference Room B attendance required. Miriam Hale, Nora Hale, Patricia Hart, Harold Hart. Subject, occupancy dispute and governing compliance. Nora read it twice. Her voice dropped. You went to the board. No, I updated the board. The board set the meeting. She looked up. You're blowing this out of proportion. Am I? Her lips tightened. She passed the paper to Caleb. We're not intruders, Mom. You're not on the lease, I said. That's technical, she shot back. We're family. This isn't about policy. It's about principle. I didn't smile, but I breathed slowly through my nose and walked back to the small sideboard. From the second drawer, I pulled out a pale blue folder, the kind used in hospitals for patients with multiple specialists. I flipped it open. Inside, a labeled tab. Evidence. Activation clause. I didn't wave it. I didn't throw it on the table. I just let it be visible. Nora saw it. So did Caleb. This isn't a court, he muttered. No, I said softly. It's not. It's a conversation, just one held under oath, with records. They both paused. Nora's throat tensed. You're willing to destroy our relationship over a technicality. I blinked. No, I'm willing to end the performance of a relationship that doesn't exist. That cracked something. She stepped forward. You're still my mother. I am, I said, but I am also a person. One who is no longer manageable there. The phrase that wouldn't leave room for negotiation. Caleb put a hand on Nora's arm. Let's go. No, she whispered. She's bluffing. I'm not, I said, stepping back toward the kitchen. The broth was boiling now, a low, steady bubble. Wednesday morning, 9 o'clock. There will be coffee. You'll want to be early. I paused and glanced over my shoulder. Oh, and don't forget your fobs. You'll need them to get in. I closed the door without looking again, and behind it, I stood in the silence of my own apartment, the envelope gone from my hand, but the resolve more tangible than ever. This wasn't war. It was calibration, a reset of boundary and history, filed under its proper name. The sky above Midtown was steel gray, the kind of overcast that made chrome trim on buildings look almost like bone. I met Mrs. Alvarez and Mr. Rossi in the small communal room, one floor down from the penthouse. It was rarely used, mostly for HOA business or floral arrangement clubs that met once a month. But today, it felt like a war table. I placed my papers down without ceremony. Mrs. Alvarez had already brought her laptop and printed bylaws. Mr. Rossi, old school, carried a leather folio, bound with a brass clasp that clicked open with a satisfying snap. We'll start with Section 3A, Extended Guest Privileges, I said. Rossi cleared his throat. Guests cannot exceed 14 continuous nights in any 30-day period without pre-authorization. Units designated as primary residences cannot be transferred in practice or intent without filing Form 5C through the council. Alvarez pointed to the clause. And they haven't filed anything. They used a generic guest card and tried to override with volume, not paperwork. Exactly, I nodded. And now they're trying to establish residency by precedent. That's squatter's logic, Alvarez muttered, sharp as vinegar. But this building has teeth. I appreciated her phrasing. I pulled out the binder Zoe had handed me from the M&M Foundation. Blue stitched edge, everything labeled by section. A simple stamped note slid out. Property conversion fully compliant. Effective since March 1st. Verified trustee M. Hale. Additional equity activated June 10th per coercion clause. Resident use case approved. It was dated, notarized, cross-referenced with city housing law. "May I?" Rossi asked, reaching for it. "Please." As he reviewed, Alvarez leaned closer. "Do they know this yet?" I shook my head. "They'll see it tomorrow, under Agenda Item 2. We all paused. I slid another folder across the table. This one less legal, more merciful. Inside were 3 hotel vouchers, 2 for a nearby business hotel, 1 for a long-stay apartment suite in Forest Hills. I've activated temporary relocation stipends through the foundation, I said quietly. It's not legally required, but it's the right kind of gesture. Alvarez raised an eyebrow. "It's an optics move?" she asked. I shook my head. "It's a human one." Rossi gave a small grunt of approval. "You'll be reducing blowback. That's wise. They'll frame it as heartless no matter what," I said. "But this takes the edge off. It gives them a way out with dignity, should they choose to see it." Mrs. Alvarez's smile was dry. "That's if they have eyes at all." I let that pass. Across the room, a cart of jasmine tea had cooled. The scent hovered, oddly grounding. I pulled my notebook from my bag. Not the legal pad, not the laptop. My husband's old brown sketch journal. Inside were scribbled notes, but also his diagrams. Back when he used to repair HVAC systems, he'd doodle spirals and ducts and coils on the corners of pages, like each system was a living being he could coax into cooperation. I'd drawn something beside them, a looped timeline of every interaction since Nora first mentioned settling down here with the Harts. When I looked at it now, it was almost surgical. A behavioral flow chart with veins of decision and infection. I underlined the last box in pencil. Wednesday, succession, not eviction. It was a quiet spell, the kind of sentence you whisper into warm soil. I looked up at Alvarez and Rossi. "You know I didn't want this," I said. "We know," Alvarez replied gently, "but they're trying to turn affection into ownership. And love isn't currency, not for property, not for peace." "That," Rossi nodded, "is why you'll win. You're not fighting to punish. You're restoring order." And quietly, like someone sealing a wound, I pressed. The folder shut. This wasn't revenge. This was closure. Stitched shut like a patient's side. Neat, sterile, necessary. Tomorrow they'd see what happened when a building with teeth also had a backbone. And tonight, I would sleep. The boardroom smelled faintly of fresh ink and bergamot cleaner. A long glass table cut the room in half like a blade, and outside, the skyline blinked with orderly silence. I arrived at 8:41. Rossi was already seated. Alvarez followed 2 minutes later with the keycard logs and a printout of compliance notices. At 8:59, Nora entered, flanked by a man in a navy suit who introduced himself only as Mr. Green. He looked like someone who mistook intimidation for professionalism. Nora didn't acknowledge me. Her hair was pulled tighter than usual, her lipstick a defiant red. I knew that color. It meant she was scared. "Shall we begin?" Mr. Green asked, tapping a silver Mont Blanc pen on the table. Alvarez adjusted her glasses. "Per the agenda, this is a review of residential occupancy policy concerning Unit PH, which, to clarify," Mr. Green interjected, "is the residence of Mrs. Miriam Hale and her immediate family, who, under New York Family Law 237C, have legal consideration as dependents and may establish shared domicile?" "Objection preempted," Rossi said coolly, placing a document on the table with a satisfying thud. "That clause is irrelevant. This isn't a matter of family law. It's an issue of deed structure, corporate entity designation, and activation of succession protocols." Mr. Green blinked. "I'm sorry." Succession? Yes, I replied softly. Succession, not eviction. Rossi slid the document across the table. 6 months ago, Mrs. Hale transferred 51% ownership of Penthouse H to the M&M Nurses Residence Foundation, a registered nonprofit under 501c3 which she controls, Green snapped. Not unilaterally, I corrected. As of 2 weeks ago, the remaining 49% was transferred under Clause 14.3, coercion trigger, triggered by verified coercive communication, intimidation, or unauthorized attempts to assume control over the residence. Alvarez turned over the next page. Text message records from Miss Nora Hale, dated June 9th. Sent at 7:46 p.m., Nora frowned. I don't, Rossi tapped his screen. We have it backed up. Would you like me to read it aloud? Green raised his palm. We'll stipulate the record exists. But the board had already leaned in. I nodded gently. Please, read it. Rossi's voice was flat. Either you hand over the keys this week or we go public. Don't forget, no one likes a selfish mother who clings to bricks. You owe me this. He tapped the next screen. Sent from Ms. Hale's number. Confirmed with IP logs. The room chilled. Nora opened her mouth, but no sound came. You texted me that while I was sitting in your childhood kitchen, I said, voice steady. Drinking the peppermint tea I used to brew when you had the flu. Green shifted. That could be interpreted. No, Alvarez interrupted. It's legally sufficient. Per the clause, the triggering condition is met. The full asset now resides with the foundation effective retroactively as of June 10th, Rossi concluded, which means, as of this morning, all building access not explicitly reauthorized under the M&M Nurses Residence Program is invalidated. He pressed a button on the conference screen. As of 9 a.m., these cards were voided. Nora Hale, Caleb Hart, Harold and Patricia Hart. Nora paled. She reached for her purse, as if to double-check. I watched her fingers tremble against the zipper. I still live there. No, I said gently. You visited. You stayed. You planned. But you never asked. Mr. Green interjected. You mean to tell me this entire move was engineered around a technicality? No, I said. It was built around trust, and your client violated it. The room fell into silence. Alvarez folded her hands. Furthermore, as part of the transfer agreement, Mrs. Hale retains lifelong residential access under Program Clause 3B, Founding Benefactor Residency. She has a permanent schedule, and rotating care professionals will use other quarters per cycle. I reached into my folder and slid one final envelope across the table. Inside, I said, are temporary relocation vouchers for the Hart family. They cover 10 nights, 2 rooms, and transportation. Rossi added, the foundation is not vindictive, but we do not tolerate appropriation disguised as entitlement. Nora's eyes dropped. She looked smaller then, not because she had lost, but because she had been seen, by law, by name, by her own handwriting. And as she stared at the copy of her own message, I realized she had never truly expected the wall to fall. But it did, and this time it fell inward. What is family? A right or a responsibility? 2 days after the board meeting, the foundation posted a photo on their social feed. It was simple, quiet, almost shy. The window of the penthouse, just as the morning light slipped in, gold on glass, shadow on brick. The caption read, a temporary home for those who stand sentinel while the rest of us sleep. Welcome to the M&M Nurses Residence, no hashtags, no names, no spectacle. But it traveled anyway. At first I didn't notice. I was at the corner cafe in Queens, cradling a warm tea and my bruised wrist from carrying folders all week. The world, to me, had gone back to small noises, heels on tile, teaspoon in ceramic. Then Zoe texted, then Linda, then 5 more young nurses I hadn't spoken to in years. Screenshots arrived like autumn leaves. The post had gone quietly, then loudly, viral. Some applauded. Finally, housing justice with actual backbone. This is how you inherit the world better. Others condemned. Kicking out your own daughter is cruel, no matter the story. Blood comes first. But one comment pierced through. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for family is stop letting them harm you. That one stayed. So did the article. A mid-sized local paper had run a piece under human interest. Widowed nurse wins battle over penthouse, chooses healing over inheritance. I never spoke to the reporter, but they got most of it right. They called me Miriam Hale, said I'd worked 34 years as a trauma nurse, said the building now housed care providers rotating in 2-week shifts. They even mentioned the clause, activated by coercion, not emotion. At the bottom was a sentence that made me exhale, sharp and full. She did not win by yelling louder. She simply outlasted the noise by then. I'd stopped checking comments, but I kept reading messages from the women I'd trained, the ones who used to cry between rotations, who learned to braid their hair into tight knots because it helped the mask fit better. They weren't jealous. They weren't bitter. They were proud. That made me feel braver than any locked door. Tuesday morning, 9 a.m. sharp. 3 rolling suitcases, 1 canvas tote bag, 4 clipboards, and a bouquet of hydrangeas, fresher than I expected. Zoe was first through the door, followed by 2 new nurses, Anna and Lisette. I'd reviewed their backgrounds myself: rural hospitals, long shifts, burnout percentages in the high 60s. They didn't look like conquerors. They looked like what they were: tired, dedicated, soft-spoken women carrying the weight of others' healing. I greeted them with coffee already made, chairs set, fresh linen folded at the edge of the sectional. "This way," I said, gesturing down the hall. "Kitchen's clean." "That cupboard's where I hide the good chocolate. The window in room B sticks a little. Just lean into it." Zoe smiled. "You always had notes." I smiled back. Notes keep people alive. They explored slowly, reverently, as if the penthouse were not a trophy, but a trust. "This marble," Anna whispered near the kitchen island. "It chips easily," I said. "Look here, see this sliver?" Patricia dropped a lemon press. I never fixed it. I liked the imperfection Lisette traced the windowsill with 1 finger. "You can see the whole East River from here." "Almost," I nodded. "If you crouch low, you'll see the fairy lights after 6:30. The sunlight had shifted. A soft patch of gold landed right where I'd placed the vase, on the dining table that used to seat 4, but now only held memory and morning light. Near the kitchen shelf, I'd hung a small wind chime, wooden, soft, engraved. On the slab of wood was a single word: begin. No date, no signature. Just the suggestion that nothing had to end. Not really. It just had to be repurposed. Before they unpacked, Zoe turned to me. "Are we allowed to feel like we belong?" she asked. I placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're not owners," I said. "You're stewards." "That's higher." She came alone. No lawyer, no Caleb, no parents-in-law, no click of heels. Just soft-soled shoes and a brown coat too large for summer. It was Thursday, 4:11 p.m. I heard the knock while watering the small potted herb tray Zoe had placed on the sill. When I opened the door, Nora didn't move past the threshold. Her eyes drifted across the room, recognizing, maybe mourning, what she once tried to own. "I heard about the article," she said. I nodded. She took another second, then stepped inside just far enough to reach the edge of the living room rug. She didn't sit. "I thought if I pushed hard enough, you'd fold," she said. "I thought that meant love. That if you gave in, it proved I mattered. I didn't interrupt. Let her speak like she was bleeding slow." "I didn't know how to ask without demanding," she admitted. "I know," I said. She stared out the window, arms crossed, not in defiance, but as a form of self-holding. "I saw the scarf on the hook." "Dad's?" "Yes." "It still smells like his cologne." I didn't reply. She turned back to me then, not crying, but red around the edges of her eyes, like someone who had tried hard not to. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness," she said. "I just didn't know how else to say I finally get it." I nodded again. Then I drew a line. "When you walk into a room and don't scan it for advantage, call me. When you say Mom without a follow-up request, I'll brew tea." She stiffened. "That's not forgiveness." "No," I said. "That's boundary. Forgiveness comes after truth. Truth comes after change." Nora inhaled, held it, then nodded. I didn't hug her. She didn't cry. But as she walked toward the door, her eyes fell on the wind chime. Her hand reached for it, but stopped just short. She turned back. "It's a beautiful word," she whispered. "Begin." And then she left. Zoe and I sat by the window after dinner, each with our own cup of weak chamomile tea. Outside, the city hummed like a memory, low, familiar, and always a bit too fast. Inside, the penthouse breathed slowly. "Do you mind if I share something?" she asked, her voice softer than steam. I shook my head. "It was my first year on nights," she began, "and I was placed on an Alzheimer's unit. One of the patients, Mr. Halverson, was in his late 80s. Sometimes he thought I was his daughter. Other times he didn't know his own name. But every now and then, in those 3 a.m. hours where everything is too quiet, he'd sit up and say her name." She paused. "Clara," Zoe whispered. He always said it gently, like he didn't want to wake her. And then he'd ask for a glass of water with 2 ice cubes. Always 2, I smiled. One night he was shaking, just his hands, like they had forgotten how to be part of him. I held one, not too firm, just enough to let it know it wasn't alone. She looked down at her tea, and for a second he looked right at me, clear as day. He said, "She used to hold it like this." That's how I knew she forgave me. I didn't speak. Neither did Zoe for a long moment. Then she added, "I never found out what he meant. I never asked. Some things don't need explaining." I looked at her fingers. Steady, quiet, the kind that remember where veins hide and how skin thins with age, the kind that hold a hand just so someone can stop shaking. "Thank you for telling me that," I said. She gave me a small nod. The air felt heavier, but not in a bad way, more like a quilt you forgot you needed. I thought of the final night I had with Marcus. The monitor lights blinked in blues and greens, tiny artificial stars. His breathing was shallow, but not labored. He had made peace with it. The nurse on call had dimmed the lights. The scent of antiseptic still lingered, but I'd brought in one of his scarves and wrapped it loosely around my wrist. It smelled like cedar, and the cologne he only wore on Sundays. I didn't hold his hand tightly either, just enough. And when the machine stilled, when the stars blinked their last, I didn't cry. I just whispered, "You kept your promise." Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes love ends the way it should. Gently, with someone who remembers how you like your water. That Sunday, the sun arrived exactly at 9 a.m., as if it too had been invited. The living room had been cleared, chairs arranged in a loose circle, not rows. No podium, no floral arrangements. Just a clean coffee table with a small vase of baby's breath and a folded linen napkin holding lemon cookies someone had brought from the bakery down the block. Representatives from the foundation came, 3 of them, crisp in navy suits but kind in posture. The building's board showed up, too. Mr. Rossi in his best tie, Mrs. Alvarez holding her clipboard like it was a medal. Even Anna and Lisette, who had pulled the night shift, stayed behind in scrubs, hair still damp from their morning showers. And me, wearing the scarf Marcus had left me. Zoe adjusted the wind chime above the kitchen entry. It had slipped slightly off-center. "Almost forgot," she whispered, tapping it once. A gentle wooden ting answered her, like punctuation on a prayer. Then one of the foundation directors stepped forward. Her name was Ava Klein, mid-40s, eyes kind but sharp. "We wanted to mark today with a simple gesture," she said. "Nothing grand, just gratitude." She pulled a small wooden plaque from her bag. The words were engraved in clean, serif font, dark on pale wood. M and M Nurses Residence. A temporary home for those who keep others whole. Underneath that, in smaller text, this space is sustained by stewardship, not ownership, and by those who understand that care is the quietest form of courage. Ava looked at me. "Would you like to say something, miss?" "Hale?" I wasn't prepared, but I'd learned that some words grow best when unpruned. I stepped forward. "My name is Miriam Hale." I was a nurse for 34 years. This penthouse used to belong to my husband and me. Now it belongs to something larger. I paused, letting the silence hold. "There are many kinds of houses," I continued. "Some are guarded with locks, others with fear. But the best ones, the ones that last, are kept not by power, but by purpose." I looked at the plaque, then out the window where light had begun to crawl across the floor, toward the chime. "There are houses you keep by giving them away," I said. "This is one of them." I stepped back. No applause, just stillness. And then, right as the sun hit the center of the rug, casting a perfect gold square onto the coffee table, the wind outside caught the chime again. It sang once gently. Everyone turned toward it. Even Mr. Rossi smiled. "Right on cue," he whispered. Later, after the plaque was mounted near the front door, Zoe poured cider into mismatched glasses. We toasted, not with speeches, but with eye contact, nods, quiet affirmations that no one needed to speak aloud. The rug caught every footstep like it remembered each one. The light stayed a little longer than usual, and the wind chime didn't ring again until the last guest had left. That was enough. That night was quieter than most. The new nurses had already gone to bed. Their rooms were dark, door cracks lit only by the sliver of hallway light I kept on for comfort, not necessity. No distant hum of television, no clinking of mugs, not even the faint rhythm of elevator cables groaning a few floors down. Just a silence that wrapped around the apartment like an old, soft coat. I sat in my armchair, one ankle tucked under the other, the familiar weight of a wool throw over my lap. My phone was face down on the end table, untouched for hours. But then it buzzed. Once? I turned it over. Nora. "I don't want anything. I want to learn how to hold on to a home without needing to own it." I stared at the screen. Her message sat there like a pebble in water, small but with ripples. There was no anger in it, no apology either. But perhaps this wasn't the kind of wound patched by words. I didn't reply, not out of spite, not anymore, but because some things are better answered by living them. I stood slowly, my joints grateful for the day's end. In the kitchen, I filled the kettle and turned the knob until it clicked. It began its soft hiss. From the cabinet above the stove, I chose 2 porcelain cups. Not matching, but both loved. One had a faint chip on the handle from when Marcus had knocked it against the sink during a kitchen waltz. The other was newer, plainer. I placed them side by side on the counter. I brewed chamomile with a touch of clove, just like he used to ask for on chilly nights. I poured 1 cup for myself. The second I set gently in front of the photo frame that always stayed on the shelf above the radiator, Marcus's picture. He wasn't smiling in it, just looking directly at the camera, steady, calm, like he knew something about what was coming. "Still here," I murmured to him. The clock read 11:52 p.m. I turned off the lights in the hallway, leaving only the warm glow of the lamp by the window. Outside, the city was alive, but far away. Cars flashed by like fish under ice. The occasional siren cut through the air, then faded just as quickly. Life moved as it always does, but inside these walls, something was still, safe. The wind shifted. The wooden chimes above the kitchen threshold stirred. Just once. 3 soft notes like a whispered sentence only the apartment could understand. I returned to the chair, cradled my tea, let the silence settle again, not as loneliness, but as peace earned. Across the room, the scarf I'd wrapped around the chair back earlier remained, draped exactly where I'd left it. It had once belonged to Marcus. Now it belonged to memory and to ritual. That's the thing about healing. It doesn't arrive like a parade. It doesn't knock or call or demand its name be spoken. It waits. Sometimes at the edge of your bed. Sometimes in a chipped teacup. Sometimes in the decision not to reply, but to live in a way that is the reply. I let my head rest back against the cushion. One deep breath, then another. The kind of breath you can only take when there's nothing left to defend. When morning comes, I'll water the window plants. Maybe I'll take the long way to the market. Maybe I'll write Zoe a note to remind her that the leaky faucet in room C needs checking again. Maybe I'll send Nora a book recommendation. Or maybe not. Maybe the door just stays unlocked. Maybe that's enough. Before we say goodbye, we'd love to know, where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee? Or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Let us know in the comments. We read everyone with gratitude. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel, not just to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that still believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with us today, wherever you are. We hope you carry this story with you. And remember, sometimes the miracle doesn't knock on your door. It waits quietly until you're ready to open your heart. Take care, and we'll see you in the next story.